All right, Section 1, policy making. Make sure that you know the steps of the policy. You're going to see that in the test as well. You're going to need that on your free response as well. So make sure that you know the steps are agenda setting, to formulation, to implementation, and then to evaluation. There's the 4 stages written there that you can see right here. Okay. Policy formulation, implementation, and policy evaluation. Remember on your free response on Friday that you will have to take either immigration or public assistance and go through that policy. Make sure that you look over those sections in your textbooks before Friday. As far as public policy, sometimes we call it a policy agenda when you have this general plan, and the whole process as it evolves over time, we'll call it a policy agenda. You make sure you need to know the orders, of course, of what goes in that policy agenda. Know that the policies usually affect broad purposes like, economic equality. That's a very broad purpose. For instance, LBJ's Great Society was the war on poverty. So it's not going to be something super specific. Policies are much larger to meet the greater good. You need to make sure you know that why people disagree about policy. A lot of the debate about policy has a lot to do with who should benefit. It has to do with how effective is it? How do we meet the means to pay for things? And of course, issue setting, issue defining things like what the media calls something. How should it be perceived? So those are really important things to know about what people have a tendency to disagree about, the purposes. Know your differences between distributive policies, redistribution policies, and regulations. Understand that distributive policies are meant to take from one state and give to another. It's not going to be broad overall. Redistributional are going to be things like your income taxes. Everybody pays it, and then we redistribute it to other places or to other sectors of society. Regulations are going to be more like following laws that are set, like the Food and Drug Administration or planes. How we make sure and check that they meet a certain code, and so those regulations are different in that capacity or that instance. Let's see. Know that public policy is incremental. Also, make sure you pay attention to this word pluralist right here. Real important on the word pluralist that you know that most of policy making is a pluralist thing, which means it involves an iron triangle, it involves interest groups, it involves issue networks, and because issue networks and interest groups and the iron triangle deal with pluralist democracy, you're talking about the expertise of people and that you're not getting each individual side. But pluralism also allows for competing groups, and so things are more effective that way. Because you don't have minorities getting squashed, but you don't have majorities taking over minority rights. So this competing between bureaucracy and Congress and interest groups allows for the most effective policy making and policy answers. Remember about fragmentation, which can happen at the implementation phase. Fragmentation usually happens from what's called federalism. That's your separation of powers. Remember that you have a federal government, a state government, and a local government. And federalism is the idea of how that federal and state and local, how those governments work together. Some people debate that states should have to do what the federal government says, but the truth is that they share certain powers, and states do have powers that allow them to say no, they're not going to do something, and so you have to go to the Constitution. For instance, immigration is one of those things where Arizona made immigration laws that went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that places like Arizona and Alabama can't make their own immigration state laws. Because it's actually, in the Constitution that immigration and those kind of policies are a power of Congress, so, and the federal government. Let's see. Environmental Protection Agency on the note right here is an example of pluralism that helps you in some way in the issue network, and the idea that the Environmental Protection Agency serves more than just one interest group. It serves the workers who compete with the owners, who then also will compete with environmentalists and other groups. So all that together in that competition helps keep a balance of what is needed. Another example of federalism, and the final thing in this, is what's called a categorical grant. You have two types of federal funding. There's categorical and block. Categorical requires states to use money in a certain way. Block gives them free reign. You just give them an amount of money, they get to do whatever they want to. But with categorical grants, that means the federal money has specific stipulations and it has to be spent in a certain way. That's Section 1.